Okay, a blessed day, everyone. Today we will be talking about another topic. It's nature, scope, and significance of stylistics. This is quite basic, however, this is necessary for you to really appreciate the course or the subject stylistics because it's not interesting to study a certain subject where you don't have any idea on what we will really be doing or what we will be doing before the semester will end. Okay, so a short review of the nature of stylistics. It is a critical method that analyzes literary works on the basis of style. We are focusing on style here above the meaning of the text. We will care for the meaning of the text only in the basis of the interpretation which is really accorded to the style or the style that the author choose will reflect to our interpretation of meaning. Therefore, this subject is really focused on the analyzing of style rather than meaning. Its practitioners focus on analyzing a writer's stylistic choices. Take note of the word choices because style is really a choice. You can have your own discretion on what style you'll be using in order to affect your reader with regard to diction or vocabulary. Please don't misunderstood diction as the articulation of words. No, it's not about articulation, but diction is word choice. Your choices of words, because there are many ways on how to kill a cat. The same with how there are many ways on how to say a thing like you're tired. Instead of saying I'm very tired, you better say, or you could also say, I'm exhausted. Or instead of said, I'm annoyed, I'm mad, you'll say, I'm provoked. So there are many ways on how to say a thing. So for syntax, the structure of the sentence is again on your discretion or on your choice on whether you'll use passive voice, active voice, loose syntax, or periodic syntax. So there are a lot of sentence patterns or syntax structures that you may use in writing your literary piece or in writing your speech or in delivering your speech or even in organizing your thoughts or your discourse in a dialogue. The same with phonology, the way you say a word, the way you choose your accent, your pronunciation is another style. Or your choice of the figurative language. You can have uh, or you can have simile, metaphor, onomatopoeia, or hyperbole. There are a lot of figurative language that you can use. So the figurative language or so again, figurative language is very common in other poetries or in all poetries or in some poetries. It depends because there are also poems which is poor in figurative language but uses other styles of writing. aside from figurative language. So, in analyzing literary works, stylisticians, that's how we call a practitioner in stylistics, explore topics whether writers use everyday speech or elevated language, whether they use periodic or loose syntaxes, whether they employ predominantly visual or auditory imagery. We all have our everyday speech and we also have our elevated language. We use everyday speech. Of course, it is simpler than the language we use in our essays, in our short story making, or even in advertisements if we are selling. So we elevate our language in accordance to our purpose or in accordance to our target receiver of the message. So we have here an example of periodic and loose syntaxes, and we also have examples for sensory words. This is a very short glance on how stylistics will, or what is, or what we will be undergoing in stylistics. So this is just an example. There are a lot of areas that you can go into in doing stylistics. Language is very broad, grammar is very broad, so this is just an example. So for sensory words, we have sight, we have sound, we have touch, we have taste, and we have smell. So if you encounter a poem with these words like blazing, glare, flickering, glittering, hazy, dim, ebony, ivory, crimson, that or these are sensory words under the sight, no? Under sight. For auditory, we have crispy, murmuring, resounding, screech, rustling, whisper, scream. For touch, we have smooth, clammy, moist, freezing, boiling, steamy, chill, shivering. For taste, we have sweet, bitter, spicy, salty, bittersweet, uh, bittersweet, bland, sour, or minty. We also have for smell, putrid, rancid, acrid, perfumed, alcohol, gasoline, fresh, juicy scent. So if you include sensory words in your poetry, you can create a great imagery. And that's the essence of making poems, creating an image so that you can affect your readers, or you can give your readers an image, or you can carry them away with a stream of your poetry. So this is just a very brief example. This is just a dot of the entire stylistics world, because there are a lot of things that you may explore in stylistics. So this is under morphology for sensory words, or diction, choice. Okay, so going back to, we are always having problems with the internet connection, so I'm distracted. So at least now you have a little idea on what to see or what to observe in literary works. So another example of syntax analysis, which is again part of stylistics, is the loose and periodic sentences. Again, I'm always reminding you that this is just a dot of the entire stylistics world. So you can explore a lot of grammar principles that may lead you to a stylistic analysis. So, for example, loose sentence has its grammatical form and its essential meaning in complete structure before it ends. Its subject and predicate often come near the beginning of the sentence, making the sentences complete grammatically before its conclusion, but subordinate parts follow and still go on in an anticlimactic form. That's climactic. So, for example, she wastes her time daydreaming, but her life is drab, and she whines because she is unhappy. So, after the word daydreaming, you already got the thought. She wastes her time daydreaming. That's all. Even after the word time, she wastes her time. That's a thought. She wastes her time daydreaming, then comma, another another extension, but her life is drab and she whines because she is unhappy. So we will proceed to periodic sentence in order for you to compare the two. So periodic sentence is a sentence where the main thought is not complete until the end. The effect is periodic sentence to the reader and is one of suspense, since the reader has to wait for the main idea until after the reader has read all the minor details which is based upon. For example, the lady, stupendously elegant and full of witness in her smiles, in a shimmering gown of gold, bejeweled from head to arm to waist, with a tantalizing melodious voice, was my Aunt Lucy. So the main thought there is the lady was my Aunt Lucy. So there are a lot of words before the thought came out. So the clue here in periodic syntax or periodic sentence is that the thought comes before the period. So in short, the lady was my Aunt Lucy without those pompous insertion. So you will see whether the author is fan of loose syntax structure or periodic syntax structure. So this is an example of stylistic analysis under syntax. So we're just focused on the structure or the style. So another nature of stylistics is it is a linguistic approach to literature explaining the relationship between language and artistic function with motivating questions such as why and how more than what. It's not all about what is the moral lesson of the story. It's not all about uh, what have you learned or what is the story all about. No, that's not the question in stylistics, but the question in stylistics is how is it written and why is that written that way. So that's according to Joe Ferilich is in his book Style and Fiction, a linguistic guide to English poetry. Remember the question how and why. More than More than, that's than, more than what? Okay, so what is the relationship between language and artistic function? So when you try to communicate, automatically you will understand the function of language. Communicative or utilitarian purposes. We use the language in order to convey ideas, to inform, and to satisfy our needs. Once we want something, like we want to buy, so upon buying, we use a language. How much is this? Can I buy that? Can you give me a glass of water? So that's under utilitarian purposes. But in artistic function or aesthetic functions, writers have an urge for creative expression in order to satisfy readers' need to feel pleasure through reading. So in literary works, readers are really after of the pleasure and also the moral lesson of the story. But mostly, since reading literary works is for pastime and adventure, so readers must really be filled with pleasure upon reading. Otherwise, on the first page or upon reading after the first page, they may be bored and find another literary work. So, how to gain the loyalty of your reader is, of course, to carry them away with the stream of your story with the use of good imagery, with the use of good words or word choices, good syntax structure. It depends to you on whether you want it passive voice or active voice or loose syntax or periodic syntax. There are still a lot of sentence structures that you may apply if ever you want to write a poem. So I'm now giving you a clue that here in stylistics, it's either you will have an analysis of certain literary works or speeches, or at first you yourself will also create your own work, literary work or speeches, in order for you to really enjoy utilizing the styles that you have in mind. So, another nature of stylistics is that it is a distinctive term that may be used to determine the connection between the form and effect within a particular variety of language. Therefore, stylistics looks at what is going on within the language, what is the linguistic associations are that the style of language reveals. Take note of the form or the style and the effect and the meaning. For example, the form is elegiac style. So the effect of that elegiac style is, of course, um, the readers may give sympathy to the writer or to the author or to the persona of the poem. So an elegy, of course, is intended for a loss of somebody dear or a grief of somebody's loss. So, expected that the effect of that elegic style form or elegic form of writing will really gains sympathetic impact or effect to the reader of the poem. So that's the nature of stylistics, looking into the relationship of the form and the effect. So other feature of stylistics include the use of dialogue. Again and again, it's not limited to literary works, including regional accents and people's dialects, descriptive language. So when you talk about accents, you are concerned with the sounds of the language. So once you analyze the sounds of a language, from one region to another. For example, the accents of Cebuano Visayan and the general American English speakers. So if you will have a comparative analysis of both languages, then you are still doing stylistics under phonology. So the use of grammar such as the active voice or passive voice. So this is now under syntax. So at least now you have a wider idea on what to do in stylistics course. So the distribution of sentence length. So in poetry, of course, the length is very short, not necessarily a sentence. So for prose, of course, longer. You can have complex sentences, compound complex sentences. So another is the use of particular language registers. So when you say language registers, it is according to the culture of a certain group of people, or to the common practices of a certain group of people, or to the expertise of the same group of people, like the language registers of practitioners in medicine, language registers of practitioners in agriculture. What we are having now is an academic register. All the terms we are using here in stylistics, like phonology, morphology, they are academic registers specifically in linguistics. So registers in linguistics. So even the word language registers is a register of linguistics. So if you want to explore this kind, so you are still doing stylistics. So even just looking into what is the choice of the author in terms of sentence length, so you'll do the examination of the sentence form, like simple, simple, compound, complex, complex, so like that. So stylistics is a scientific study of style. When you say scientific, there's no bias. So because it follows an objective methodology, it's not subjective, namely retracing and recovering the process of text production. Example, the intention of the writer. Starting from the clues left in text as product. So you will only analyze from the text itself as a product. It is a product because it is consumed by the readers. So again, it is emphasized here that you will only analyze the text and not even the biography of the author, because once you try to analyze a literary piece with the use of the biography of the author, or what the author has been going through while writing a certain literary piece, there's a greater tendency that your study will be subjective. So in this case, since you are only analyzing the text, so it is objective, it is scientific. So it sets it apart from any other less scientific methods of text analysis. So the use of particular language registers, no, that's not included. Next, it is impossible to paraphrase literary writings, to translate literary works, to divorce the general appreciation of a literary work from appreciation of its style for the inevitable loss of the hidden metaphoric meaning. So once you want to interpret the meaning of a certain literary work, especially poetry, translation is not really enough, because the style should be retained. The metaphors used in a certain poetry does not really mean what is commonly associated with that word. Because if you say uh, water's dropping by or water's dropping from my eyes, it's not really the ordinary water, but it's the tear. So translation is a no-no in in appreciating a literary work, especially in poetry. So scope of stylistics, it attempts to establish principles capable of explaining the particular choices made by individuals and social groups in their use of language, such as socialization, the production or reception of meaning, literary criticism, and critical discourse analysis. This is what is interesting with stylistics, since it's all about the choices that the author is uh, doing. So, for example, if we put ourselves into the situations of the author, or if we try to create our own literary work, we are enjoying our choices of style. So in order for us also to have an enhanced or advanced style, we have to explore the choices of known authors. So it's a two-way process. If you think that you are a better writer than the author or the known authors, then you can have your own before exploring. So it's up to you. So if you need more ideas on the styles of writing, then from now on, start exploring literary works. So stylistics can tell us how to name constituent part of a literary text and enables us to document their operations. So when you say constituent, it's everything from a phonetic constituent, phonologic constituent, morphologic constituent, syntactic constituent, semantic constituent. Everything is a constituent. So, but in doing so, it must draw upon the terminology and methodology of multiple disciplines, the study of meter, narrative, and dialogue. Okay, so what is really the general aim of this subject? Of course, to determine which stylistic features is predominant or stylistically significant in a certain literary work, or to decide which function the stylistic features play in the overall meaning of the text or interpretation. So my own expectation for this subject is that you will really be enjoying your own style in the creation of your own literary work, and also analyzing the style of other authors. So again, formal stylistics is all about how a writer writes, or no, how a writer writes. No, that's not how a writer writers. How a writer writes. So is greater than what a writer writes. So the devices authors use to express their thoughts and to convey the subject matter of works. I suggest that you explore the literary devices or the figurative language. There are a lot, I guess more than 20 literary devices that you may use in the future if I will instruct you to create a literary work. So the content which these critics refer to as information or message. So it's not more on the meaning of the text, but on the structure only. So formal stylistics Understand style as the way authors can present the content of a work, ways that invariably affect its aesthetic quality and the reader's emotional reaction. So this is a summary of our previous slides. So your style, your form of writing should affect the emotions of your readers in order for them to be satisfied with their intention to be pleased, or in order for them to really feel what you want them to feel. For example, if you want them to feel the sorrow that you are feeling, then use the right words to make them feel such. Okay, so we are done with these levels of language in our previous lecture, so at least you can have a glance with with these levels, because I'm always emphasizing that this topic is very important, because again, in doing stylistics you will go through these processes. So let's end our lecture here, and thank you for listening. Keep following so that if there are new lecture videos, you will be able to be updated. Okay, thank you very much and God bless. Stay safe in this pandemic season.